Somewhere in a locked vault, in the dust of forgotten shelves, the gospel waited for centuries. It tells a story that breaks everything we've ever been told about our history. Not to just simply destroy belief, but to challenge who gave it to us. What if Jesus wasn't crucified? We're going to be talking about the Gospel of Barnabas, the gospel that most people have never heard of. The Gospel of Barnabas is an ancient manuscript said to have been hidden for centuries. It tells a version of Jesus' life that breaks with everything in the official canon. In this telling, Jesus wasn't crucified. He wasn't the literal Son of God. And Judas didn't just betray him, Judas became him. According to this gospel, Judas was made to look like Jesus. He was crucified in Jesus' place while Jesus escaped alive. The story didn't just drift into obscurity, it was buried, named heresy, banned, and erased. But here's the question: if it's fiction, why is it feared? You usually don't erase what's harmless, what's fake. You erase what threatens to rewrite the narrative. In the Gospel of Barnabas, Jesus knows what's coming. He begs God to save him. And in response, Judas is transformed, his face altered to look exactly like Jesus. He is seized, mocked, and crucified while the real Jesus ascends. No resurrection, no tomb, no crown of thorns. But even stranger, this gospel predicts the coming of Muhammad, aligning closely with Islamic theology. That one detail was enough for many to call it a Muslim forgery. But here's the paradox. If Muslim came after Christianity, how could this gospel contain teachings that align with the Quran unless those ideas had deeper roots? What if the Quran didn't invent that story of Jesus? What if it just simply preserved it? Now, the Bible isn't the only book that says this. As many know, the Bible isn't just one book. It's a carefully edited collection, a canon, not a revelation. Dozens of Gospels were written in the first centuries, and the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Truth, the Acts of John. Many of them offered radically different pictures of Jesus. Some claimed he never died. Some said salvation wasn't external, but internal. Some gave voice to women, others to the soul. They were labeled dangerous, not because they were provably false, but because they were inconvenient. What does it say about a religion when its earliest voices had to be silenced? Why did the council in the 4th century get to decide what millions would be allowed to believe in for the next 2,000 years? They weren't preserving truth, they were choosing which version of truth would survive. As you start to feel that shift, the one where something doesn't sit quite right, pause for a second, because you're not here by accident. If you're still watching, you already know this isn't about shock. It's about peeling back the veil. If you're drawn to asking questions most people avoid, this is a place. And if you want to help keep this work unfiltered and fiercely independent, that's what my Patreon is for. You're not just supporting a channel, you're helping build a community of co-creators that thinks like this, that simply is not afraid to ask questions and why. Why is this? Why is that? Why do we have to just accept everything the way that it is? I'm not claiming, for example, that this gospel is true or not. I don't know. Do you know? How do we know? Either way, please do make a point of liking and subscribing. Now, let's go deeper. Scholars call the Gospel of Barnabas a medieval forgery. I was always under the impression that a forgery was a copy of something that was real that turned out to be fake. So this seems to be a bit of a stretch on those terms, but I guess maybe it's just another definition that I'm not as clear about. They point to inconsistencies, language that belongs to later centuries, descriptions of wine in wooden caskets, references that feel a little too modern. But forgeries don't usually survive centuries unless they're hitting a nerve. Maybe the real reason isn't, was this the original gospel? Maybe it's, why does this story keep showing up in different cultures and different languages across history? This is not the only book that mentions this story. We find echoes of this in the second treatise of the Great Seth, a Gnostic text that says, "It was not I who suffered, but someone else. I was rejoicing in the height over all the riches of the archons." Even in early Christianity, There were already those who believed that crucifixion was an illusion, a shadow play for a deeper truth. You don't need to believe that to ask why so many did feel that way. How did people in those early days question that? And we're not even told that they even had a question. In 2012, a 1,500-year-old Bible surfaced in Turkey, written in Syriac. It contained a gospel where Jesus denies being crucified and foretells the coming of Muhammad. The Vatican requested access. Now, whether or not it was the Gospel of Barnabas, the fact remains the version of Jesus exists that we're never meant to see. And here's something most people don't know. One of the most respected early Christian fathers taught a form of reincarnation. He said, the soul was neither beginning nor end. It passes through multiple lives depending on its actions. That wasn't fringe. At the time, it was mainstream theology until it was erased in the Second Council of Constantinople in 553 AD. Think about that for a moment. Early Christianity taught, it's just part of the canon, about reincarnation, and they just arbitrarily decided to take it out. Why would they do that? So it's not just texts that were buried. Ideas, mystics, entire passive awakening. Every time something threatened the gatekeeper's control, it was labeled heresy. And isn't that the oldest story in history? Truth isn't killed, it's rewritten. Now let's step back for a moment. What if the crucifixion did happen, and what if it didn't? Maybe the question isn't about flesh and nails, but what about what needed to die? Maybe the cross isn't a place, it's a symbol. Not of sacrifice, but of surrender. Not of pain, but of perspective. Not of salvation, but of awakening. What dies on the cross is an illusion. Maybe Jesus wasn't here to be worshipped. Maybe he was trying to show us how to escape the dream. What if the real resurrection isn't about a body, but a consciousness? What if the point was never to follow a religion, but to remember what we already are? Why is it that our history is so heavily guarded? And not just Christian history, but all of it. Every religion has its gatekeepers. Every tradition has its voices that were erased. And even archaeology, even science is shaped by who funds the dig and who buries the evidence. Who agreed these gatekeepers get to tell us what is true and what isn't true? Did you vote on that? What we call Christianity today is just a version that has survived. But in the first few centuries, there wasn't one Christianity. There were many. Competing visions, competing gospels, competing truths, and what made it into the Bible had more to do with power than purity. And how do we know that the people who decided what belongs in the modern Bible had our best interests in mind and not their own? And think about it, back at that time, they never imagined that so many people would learn how to read. You just had to believe whatever they said. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm not taking sides. I'm just asking the questions most people were never told to ask. What you do with these questions are entirely up to you. I don't know what to make of the Gospel of Barnabas. Maybe it's a forgery, maybe it's a prophecy, but I know this, it makes me want to know more. Because if the one thing they tell you never to look at is oftentimes the one thing they fear that you'll see, that maybe that's exactly where we should be looking. What if Jesus wanted us to know more of his story and more of God's story, and someone decided just to keep it from you? It seems kind of likely that may be the case. No knowledge is bad knowledge. It's only what you do with it. And I'm determined to look at all of it. Every buried text, every silenced voice, every uncomfortable question. Let's keep going. And if you're feeling uncomfortable right now, good. That means you're still thinking for yourself, because the people who benefit from your silence depend on your comfort. Maybe the greatest heresy isn't doubting a book. It's asking who wrote it and why. Maybe the truth isn't what we're told. Maybe the truth is what we're never allowed to ask. I don't know what to think myself, but ask yourself, why were you never allowed to read it or even know it exists? Who decides what version of truth you're permitted to see? And what else have they buried? Not because it was false, but because it conflicted with what they wanted you to believe. This is the Maverick Mind. And if this stirred something inside of you, don't look away. Ask better questions. And we've only just begun. And if they've hidden this gospel, along with others like Thomas, Mary, and Seth, what else do we not know about? Or what stories were lost not by accident but by design? What truths are still locked away, waiting to be remembered? Will you walk with me? Let's find out. Thank you.